Here I would like to welcome our session speaker, Dr. Nitin Chauhan from Third Eye Techno Solutions Private Limited, Delhi. He is Master's in Forensic Science from National Institute of Criminology and Forensic Science with specialization in document examination and fingerprints. He currently working as solution consultant and his area of expertise crime scenes management, evidence collection and preservation, evidence analysis, communication and navigation, device forensics, data mining and visual analytics of information. Welcome, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. So I'll be just quickly discussing because computer forensic in itself is a very complex topic, and 1.5 hour is extremely less to cover it. So what I have done is I have skipped the standard PowerPoint presentation, and I will be just showing you some of the hands-on stuff that what can be done with the technology available with us in routine hand. So primarily, quickly, we will discuss that what is digital forensics. So say digital forensic, forum word comes from a Latin side, which means pertaining to judiciary. So anything which lands in the court of law, whether from physics, biology, chemistry, explosive science, space science, etc., that becomes forensics. So any digital evidence which goes for the scrutiny of judiciary comes into the digital forensic domain. So primarily, if we look these days, any crime which you can think of, starting from petty theft to specialized crime like drug trafficking, human trafficking, terrorism, say extremism, etc. Whatever you think of, these days have some sort of digital element into it. That is primarily because to organize any kind of crime or to execute a crime, okay, these days you require faster and reliable communication, and that communication backbone is provided by digital technology, and be it cell phone, laptop, satellite phones, smartphones, feature phones, drones, whatever is available these days are somehow involved in all these type of crimes. Okay, and primarily why people commit crime via digital medium. So primary reason for this, which I understand, is there are 3 or 4 factors. One factor is say it can be done remotely. Okay, so say in good old days, say consider around say 30 years or 50, or say 40 years before, if someone has to say something to someone bad, okay, someone has to abuse somebody, okay, what he has to do at that point of time. So what he had to do at that point of time is he had to physically show up at the door of the individual and say those bad words. Okay, but now you need not to be physically present in front of that person. Okay, you simply say these things over a internet post, WhatsApp message, SMS, even a call, etc. So first motivation factor for the people to commit these type of crime via digital medium is the remote executability. Okay. Then another important thing is the anonymousness. Okay. In digital world, we can acquire a anonymous identity or a fake identity, and we can give a lot of harm to other person. Okay, other person, other organization. It could be anything. Okay. So second factor is primarily the anonymity, and third factor is that primarily, if we look, there is a sense of uh, you know say what we call trust, okay, or say for example, if something happens to someone via digital media, you consider take example of these OTP frauds, etc. If from someone's account some 5,000 rupees has siphoned off, that person may not go to the police station to lodge a formal complaint. What he will do is he will change his mobile number, he will inform the bank, he will get his credit card or debit card number changed, etc. Okay. So this factor, okay, of not taking initiative for whether the crime is of 5,000 rupees or it involves 5 million rupees, okay. So this factor is another factor which gives motivation to the criminals, okay, especially in the fraud industry, in terms of fraud, because they know that the person may not go to report this thing to the law enforcement agencies for say 1,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees, etc. Same as in the stalking, etc. Okay, so it might be possible some girl is being stalked by some boy. Okay, so what is the default action that girl may take? First thing is, okay, block the number, change the mobile number or mobile handset, acquire a new WhatsApp or Facebook identity. That is the most simplest thing, and that acts as another motivation factor for the criminals to perform these type of crimes. Okay. Now, what are the primary challenges which we face in day to day? Now, most important challenge which we as an investigator face is the delay in the seizure of the evidence, and that happens because the agencies or the department reaches to these devices quite late. Okay. Say for example, if some incident has happened in January, and if that device via which that incident has happened, or the device which is responsible for that incident has been identified after 4 months or 5 months, in that case, we may not be able to recover those required artifacts or the artifacts which has been requested by the investigating officer from these devices. Okay, because these devices by that time have performed so much activity which might have overwritten or overwritten the data which has been belonging to the past artifacts. Okay, so this also acts as a indirect motivation factor for the people to commit the crime, because they know that by the time the agency would trace these things, etc., etc., we would have acquired a new identity, we would have thoroughly cleaned up our devices, etc. So very swift say action has to be required when we are performing digital investigations. Now, coming to the digital crime scene management. Primarily, whenever we enter a crime scene, whether it is a home or cyber cafe or an organization, etc. First thing is the crime scene photography. It is a standard photography which we do in any type of crime. Okay, generally based on photographs and videographic evidences, just to document and freeze the situation that okay, this was this. Okay, say for example, when we enter into a cyber cafe, we just want to document how many computers are there. Okay, because after 5 years or 7 years or 10 years later, you won't be remembering when this case will land up into the court for trial. Okay, at that time, if defense lawyer has asked you that how many computers were there. Okay, so that kind of documentation need to be performed in. So crime scene photography is pretty important factor in crime scene management. Then interviewing the suspects, sometime victim or sometime eyewitness at the scene, etc., just to gather much more situational awareness that what has happened and how it has happened, what are the potential suspected individuals, etc. Then comes the searching of the crime scene for digital exhibits. Okay. Now this is a very crucial thing, and most of the time, the success of any criminal investigation or not only the criminal investigation, but even for the corporate investigation also, depends on that what items you have identified which may contain the digital evidence pertaining to the incident which we are investigating at that point of time. So first thing is that we need to prepare ourselves. Okay, so preparation is very crucial in responding to the digital forensic incidents. Now, in terms of preparation, as an incident response team, we need to have some basic things with us. Okay, these basic things include a lot of things like forensic bridges. Now, these forensic bridges are nothing but these are the devices which allow you to make the copy of the data. Okay, so now if I quickly show you one such device, let me quickly pull it out. Okay, so if you just type simply disk duplicators, so the moment you get these type of devices, so these are not the forensic disk duplicator, but standard disk duplicator. Okay, but if you go in and if you type the forensic, so the moment you type the forensic, you may get something like this. Okay, so there are n number of companies who make these devices, both international as well as indigenous. Okay, now this is the standard disk duplicator. So it has two sides. One is write block side, which is a source side. Another is a destination side on which you can connect blank hard drives. Okay, so this is basically for those type of devices which basically we are having like SATA drives, IDE drives, memory card, pen drives, optical media like CD drives, etc. These can be duplicated into routine forensic images or forensic duplicates, because only in digital forensics we have advantage that we can clone and we can work on the copy of the data. Okay, this advantage we do not have in any other field of forensic science. Say for example, a murder has happened with a say firearm. Okay, so you have a weapon like pistol or a revolver or a country made weapon. Okay, now, to fire a test bullet, you cannot make a clone of that firearm. You have to fire test bullet from the original weapon. Okay. But in digital forensics, we have advantage that we can copy the original as many as time we want, and we can work on those copies. Okay, so this is the advantage which is available only in this domain. There is some advantage, of course, is available in biology and serology, where we can make the copies of DNA and RNA based upon the PCR, etc. But there also there are a lot of challenges. Okay, but here we can do a lot of duplication, and we can work on the duplicate so that we can preserve the forensic integrity of the original as it is seized from the scene. Okay, so you've got the disk duplicators, then you get the forensic bridges. Now, forensic bridges are basically, again, the devices which basically allow you to access the suspect storage media in a read-only manner. Okay, then you got certain live boot disk. So these live boot disk allow us to boot the suspect system in a read-only manner. Okay, but the condition here is these live boot disks generally works on the environment where whole disk encryption is not enabled. Okay, so if BitLocker is enabled or some Linux Lux say whole disk encryption is enabled, in that case you won't be able to mount the suspect file system till you have the decryption keys. Okay, then the triage tools. So these triage tools basically helps us to identify the correct storage of the digital evidence. So for example, I'll give you a very crude example. Say from one cyber cafe, some email has been sent to some political leader. Okay, and the entire administration comes into action and they go to that cyber cafe. Now, in that cyber cafe, you will find that there may be 20, 30 computers. Okay, so from which computer this mail has been sent? Okay, how you are going to identify that on scene? There are two ways. Either you become Hanuman and take all these 25 computers and bring to the lab. So in that way, you are going to increase the burden of the forensic scientist 25 times. Okay. Second thing is that you perform a digital triage at the scene and try to identify the box which potentially have sent the mail. And once you have identified that, then you perform the analysis. So in that way, you can reduce the bulk of the processing time drastically if we use triage tool first to identify the potential evidence. Okay, then of course we have analysis tools, etc. Now I will quickly discuss with you how we are going to say work upon a running machine, okay, live machine. Generally, when we are working on a live machine, then we are going to perform some changes in it. So there is no way to prevent the live environment from the changing because it is running environment. So it will be changing at any cost. Okay. So first thing is just to check whether the operating system on which we are working upon or the file system on which we are working upon, whether it is having the whole disk encryption enabled upon it or not. Now, whole disk encryption could be say McAfee, Symantec, BitLocker, Veracrypt, TrueCrypt. It could be anything. Once you have identified these things, so the first thing after identification of the disk encryptions is that you initiate the memory capture, taking the dump of the RAM. Once you have acquired the RAM, because RAM will give us a lot of data which will be available in the RAM pertaining to these disk encryptions. Okay, we may get the decryption keys because file system might be mounted at that point of time. And it would be very easy for us to decrypt this file system at the later point of time when we create a bit by bit forensic image of this box. Okay. Then software and hardware profile, what kind of hardwares are available into it, like RAM, other hard drives, etc. In case of server, it becomes very crucial because servers may have multiple array of RAIDs. Okay, they may have RAID 5, RAID 10, RAID 6, RAID 0, RAID 1, etc. So that hardware profile has to come, that what kind of RAID is available, whether that RAID is software based or hardware based. If it's hardware based, what kind of hardware they are using, etc. So that when we take out the drive, we can replicate all these things up. Okay. Then browsing in file system artifacts, collecting important files from important locations like desktop, my documents, downloads, etc. Sometime we can speed up this live collection, specifically if we have some preemptive information. Preemptive information like we have the name of files. We might have to search to certain specific pictures or videos. Okay, so we may have their hash values in advance. So we can collect this data on the basis of date, time, file size or file type, etc. Okay, and then once we have once we have made ourselves satisfied that now we have collected majority of the information which would have been lost if we have shut it down this machine. Okay, then after that we can shut it down. Now once you have acquired these things live, then there are two versions of putting these things down or bringing these machines down. Some investigators says that best way to terminate this process is you pull the plug or remove the battery of the laptop. Okay, so you freeze everything. Okay, but I do not believe so. I say if you do a proper shutdown, that would be more advantageous because sometimes I have seen this in my practical experience. Then when we pulled out the plug, okay, then everything ceased. The drive moved to cease, and most of the time we have mechanical drives. Okay, so bringing the power down may cause a damage to the mechanical drives. Okay, so that is one contingency which we have to keep in mind. Although some investigators say that best way is to pull the drive out, but I say do a systematic shutdown, document it with the help of photography or videography if we can. Now, if we have loose drives or loose exhibit like external hard drives or the internal hard drives, then we simply can create forensic images. Okay, so now I will quickly demonstrate you how easily we can create the forensic images. Okay, so now I'll quickly demonstrate you. We can do that. Let me pull the data. Okay, so now let's quickly see in here. So what I have is a Windows machine up over here, and so this machine is not having any hardware write blocker. I'm just going to show you a simple way to write block the devices. So right now, what I'm having is in this, I'm having a pen drive. You can say this pen drive. If I right now right click on this, you can see I can create new folders. Okay, and I can write anything onto it. Even I can do copy and paste. That means currently my ports are read write enabled. Okay, now what I can do quickly is I can quickly run this batch scripts as administrator. Now this is a free application, but as I say, what it does is it basically creates a storage device policy which with write protect and just add a dword value 1. So the moment it enters a dword value 1, it will write block all the USB ports on the devices, and this is based on the Windows registry. So you have to be very careful. Although it is tried and tested, but it is still not recommended in production environment. It is good for research and other things. Or if you do not have anything, it is good, but it is not recommended for professional thing. Okay, but just to demonstrate you the functionality, I'm just running these things. Okay, so now let's say right now my write blocker is not engaged. I'm just pressing 1, enter. Now my write blocker is engaged. So now if I insert a new drive into the box, okay, this should give me the read-only access. So now if you see the option to create new folder, paste, or other things has been disabled automatically by the Windows operating system. The same thing we can achieve in Linux with the help of UDAV rules. Okay, so you can download some live dextro Linux like Kane, or you can use Paladin. There are many available. Popular one is Helix Forensics, which is quite older, not updated much, but the latest one would be the Kane, which will help you to achieve the similar functionality with a Linux box. Okay, with the help of UDAV rules, or you can create your own UDAV rules if you wish and add them during the boot. So in that case, whatever file system is available other than the operating system will be mounted in the read-only mode. Okay, so now if you think this is mounted into read-only mode, now it is read-only. Even I won't be able to format this. Even if I start, it says The disk is write protected. Okay, fine. So this could basically helps us to write protect these things in this environment. Now, how we are going to create a bit by bit forensic image? So let's quickly launch a free application, Access Data FTK Imager. This is the most commonly used forensic acquisition tool across the world, and it is quite powerful in terms of it gives you enormous functionality. Okay, being just a forensic imager, it gives you a lot of functionality, like say physical drive. Next, so here is my 8 GB thumb drive, which is physical drive 2. Now, once I have mounted this physical drive, I have the visibility of both the partitions available into it. I can see one is NTFS, another is ext2. If required, I can quickly go into the properties. I can check their volumes, etc. Okay, drive geometry, how many cylinders, sectors, etc. Are available. At this point of time, if we are at the scene of crime or if we are at the suspect location, instead of creating, say, forensic image, we can calculate its hash value also. Okay, so that also gives us a very good starting point to present this evidence in court of law. So unless we calculate a cryptographic checksum of the seized storage device at the scene of crime, it would be very difficult to define it into the court of law. Okay. So this can be done quickly from here. We can click here and it will start calculating the MD5 and SHA-1 hash values. Okay. So this would take around 7 minutes. I'm just canceling this up. Now I can also export the entire disk image. So the popular format is DD, which comes from the Unix side, disk duplication side. Then in forensics, E01, expert witness format is very much common. So all these three formats are the regular formats which are being used in industry for quite a long. But what I prefer DD. If we are making a forensic image, best is DD because it is without any compression. It is raw format. Okay, so we can quickly initiate this. We can give these details. This is basically primarily for chain of custody. You can give folder. Okay, so now select this. Okay, and a name to forensic image. You can give any name. At this point of time, if you want, we can encrypt the image also so that only authorized individual can have access to its content. We can also segmentize it. Sometime you might be acquiring 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte or 4 terabyte disk image. So sometimes it is good to store it in the form of chunks. It's like 1.5 GB chunk, 2 GB or 4 GB chunk, depending upon from what kind of archival media you are trying to store. Okay, or what kind of file system your destination media is going to have. So 1500 is quite good. Now chunking is important because sometimes what we have seen is, say, the drive is 500 GB source drive and we are making a forensic image. It might be possible that after, if we are not giving a chunk, we are making one single file of, say, 500 GB. In that case, it might be possible that, say, if my process reaches to 85% or 95%, and if I encounter some bad sectors or something happens to my disk, at that time, I won't be having my entire process will roll back. So it is always good to have the chunk. So even if my process gets interrupted in between because of any reason, in that case, I would have something to work with. Okay, so this is sometimes advantageous. I can pre-calculate the statistics. I can verify the image, and we can also add an overflow location. That means I can add a network location to SAN or NAS where I can push this data over there for storage purposes. Now let's say quickly start this. So now in the backend, this image is being created. Okay. Now I will quickly walk you through while this is going down. Okay. Now my disk write blocker is engaged. Now I'll quickly walk you down through the another process of how we are going to analyze this kind of data. So we can use a plethora of tools. One of the favorite of mine is Autopsy, which is fully open source. And then there are certain commercial applications like Encase, FTK from the Access Data, Encase from Guidance System, Magnet Axiom, Balkasoft, etc., etc. OS Forensics. So there are a huge number of commercial tools which are available. But and it is advisable that whenever you are working as a digital forensic expert, or when you are processing the digital exhibit, you must process your forensic exhibit with multiple tools. Okay, because if you are say performing it from different tools and you are arriving at a single fact or single artifact from multiple tools, then this gives a little bit a sense of independence to our judiciary, who are going to scrutinize, or who are going to bank upon your report. Okay, that you have not relied only on one tool. And this artifact which you are discovering, on which we are banking for our investigation, whether it is a deleted file or chat log or call log or an SMS or a file or a password protected file or document or audio, video, etc., is not only discoverable by one tool, but it is discoverable by many other tools. And if one of your tool is open source, it is always good, because that will give chance to the defense party to replicate these artifacts for themselves. Okay, so in that way, that will save a huge amount of time in our court of law, where the moment the case comes at the trial stage, the defendant party wants a copy of the data and they want to run their own forensics. Okay, so that is another quick aspect of using the open source. So if you are using commercial, that's always good, but one set of tools should be from the open domain. So I'll just quickly create one case. So this is just a case, and this is my data, where my case data would go my case number, etc. I'm just finishing this up. Now, what kind of data I can add into it? I can add the disk images or VM files for virtual machines. If I'm having VMDK or other VDI files, etc., I can directly attach them. I can attach a local disk connected with a write blocker, etc. Okay, I can attach logical files. That means a bunch of files or collection of files. Now these files come from may come from different sources. Like in corporate investigations, majority of investigations are targeted towards the email investigation. In case of corporate investigations, we can collect a lot of PST files or mail dumps, and we can put them into an archive or a folder, and we can put it to the logical files. Unallocated space images, that means while acquiring the forensic image, we can acquire selectively unallocated space only, just to carve the deleted data or the data which might have been there in file system. When we are getting the unallocated space, we can try to include the slack space as well. So let's quickly add a disk image, and let's say quickly we have one image. So this is the same image which we are creating up. I have already created in advance. Now, here at this point of time, it will quickly ask me that what I really want to do with it. I say, okay, do the recent activity, do the hash lookup, calculate MD5 even if there is no hash check provided, identification, extension mismatch, check for all files, embedded file extractor. This is pretty good because this would extract the data from zip, Excel, PPT. Say for example, you have a document file, Word file. It is having a lot of graphical files or tables into it. So it will take out those graphic files out of it. EXIF parser, we know if we have the files from cameras, especially the smartphones, etc., we can extract the EXIF metadata. Keyword search basically helps us. So this basically helps us in identifying, say if we have to search something. So with this keyword search, what it will do, it will create Apache Lucene index of the entire source data, including unallocated space. So if I am searching for a keyword, it will search in unallocated space files as well as in unallocated space. So this basically helps us. Then if we have PST or mbox type of files, etc. Okay, encryption detection also helps us. Photoric carver, this helps us in carving the files, etc. So these are the popular things which we can quickly do. And see, you need not to select all these things in every case. So they are dependent upon the requirement of the investigating officer or the context or the case which we really are performing upon. Okay, now let's say finish. So now you can see the data which we have added, it has started coming in, like it is looking in internet history, it is looking into my document, searching my search engine searches, analyzing registry files, etc. So it is open source tool, and best part is its functionality can be increased and customized based upon Python plugins. Okay, so if you can write Python plugins, so basically you can extend its capabilities beyond our imagination. Okay, so basically it helps in that sense a lot. So now if I look into the file system, I can quickly see, okay, this is my file system. Okay, now it has added certain virtual folders. Now these virtual folders are basically the one for card file. Okay, like this is the card file which it has carved off quickly. Okay, some document files, some Excel files, etc. Then certain orphan files which may not be required by the user at this point of time, etc. Then we can quickly see the program files user. If we say users, say management, desktop, and we can see the items and files, their file metadata, their other occurrences, the application which we have, or their hex structure. Okay, so it is still performing these analysis. It will be finished in just few minutes. And by the time, if we look up here, you can say it has already created roughly around say 34% of the forensic image which we are creating. Okay, so this is another process which is going on side by side. So this is basically the file system thing which we are getting from. Now let's quickly look the views. So this is based upon the file extension which we have given that, okay, identify these files. So all the image files which we have, they can come here. Okay. And if we find anything relevant or important, we can right click it and we can just simply say that we can create a new tag. Okay, so now what we can quickly do is basically we can tag this file as important or relevant so that at a later point of time we can only export things which we have marked as relevant. Okay. So this basically helps us, so we can quickly go into the videos, audios, all these files, etc. Okay, so all these things could be up in there. Okay, then you have document files. You have not only these, but you have other files also. So this also supports you the Unicode data. So you can randomly look for any set of data, whether it is English or other foreign language, etc. Okay, so this is this. Now, quickly look into the EXIF metadata. So you can see this photograph has been taken from Sony. This is from Kodak. This is from Olympus, etc. Uh, Encryption, potential encryption detection. So these are the two files which have been password protected. So this we can export out and we can throw them on certain password extraction utilities like John the Ripper, which is open source and free, or some commercial applications like Passware or Access Data Password Recovery Toolkit, etc. Extension mismatch, potentially the files which says like say extension is zip, but it says it is basically a text file. Okay, so in that case, installed programs, what programs have been installed and on what date they have been installed, operating system information, where this operating system information is coming like when this operating system is installed. Okay, it is installed in 2007. Recently accessed documents. This is primarily coming from link files. Now, this I'll quickly explain the importance of link file. Now, link file analysis can give us huge visibility or in terms of detecting and identifying the situations where somebody has taken something on a thumb drive. Okay, say for example, investigating agency, especially in corporate environment, they may want to identify that what all external thumb drives have been connected to this machine. Okay, and is there any document or other file have been accessed from those drives. So that becomes very easy if try to look for these type of values, especially from the link file. So link file can give us the point. Like how it works is, say for example, if I connect a thumb drive into my system, especially the Windows system, and if I copy something into the pen drive, the general human tendency is that after copying data into thumb drive, we go into the thumb drive and we validate whether this data has been copied properly or not by executing it. The moment we execute it, it throws back a link into the shortcut folders. That gives us a quick idea that recently these files have been accessed from a removable drive or an external drive. Okay, so this is where we can identify the exfiltration of the data from these suspected machines. Okay, then recycle bin remote machines when we connect, especially by say we have some remote sharing folder on a different machine on which we are say sending some of data or copying some data. Shellback gave us quick access into the document and the folder which we are accessing. Then the USB devices, what type of USB devices have been connected to it? Okay, like Dell, SanDisk, along with their serial number, Apple, iPod, etc. So a lot of time we get the details of the mobile devices like Samsung or Xiaomi or Vivo, etc. have been connected to these machines. Okay, so that will also give you another set of data. Some user suspected content which might have been created up there. Okay, so that also gives us quite data. Then browsing artifacts, basically the cookies. This will help us that what domain it is coming from and when it was created and web history and what was the domain and what was the program used for it, whether it is Internet Explorer, Firefox, Mozilla, or Chrome, or etc. Okay, and where these things have gone. Then different searches, and if these searches are coming, then they are coming from which search engine or they are coming from which browser, etc. So these artifacts also really helps us in identifying these things. Okay. Now, if you remember that we performed indexing of this particular data. So now this basically helps us quickly. Now, if I type any keyword, say money, and if I search it, it will quickly give me that this money keyword is available in these many files. Okay, sometime in file name, and sometime basically in the data itself. And then if required, we can either say if it if it's possible, then we can launch them into an external viewer, and we can quickly look at how it would have looked to that individual on the browser or etc. So those type of searches could be identified. Okay, and whatever keyword you have searched, that would be highlighted up over here. So it's a pretty good tool in terms of doing these things. Okay, now we can also search things on the basis of regular expression. So say for example, email address. So this is a standard regular expression for email addresses. And this is the regular expression for URLs. So it has identified these many say email addresses. We can quickly hit them that okay, this is the one particular email address which is coming in, and this particular email address is available in these many EML files. Okay, so we can primarily try to look what type of data it is. Okay, so we can primarily look for this kind of data. This is coming from email side. Okay, now a lot of time we have a lot of data coming from these different sources, and we want to put it in terms of timeline. So if I want to quickly identify it on the basis of timeline, I can quickly create a timeline on top of it. This timeline would basically help me in just a moment, it's not firing up. Okay, I'm not having any of those then. Okay, somehow my timeline window is not populating. Might be because I have not selected that option during the pre-processing of that data. But nevertheless, now let's quickly look into another feature, that is basically the communications. Now, if we look in terms of communication, this basically helps us in identify the communication in terms of like call logs, SMS, emails, wherever we can communicate something. So if I select all these email IDs in my communication and I add them into the visualization, so this will quickly give me an idea that okay, how these mail IDs are linked. Okay, how these individuals are linked upon. Okay, so if I select on the link and see the size of the link tells that how frequent communications they are making to each other. Okay, so if I select here and if I come into the message, then I can see that. Okay, similarly, if I click in here, I can quickly see the individual messages or summaries, that how many messages I have, how many attachments I have, how many attachments are available on those messages, etc. Okay, so this basically also gave me another dimension of looking at the data itself. Okay. So this is primarily if we are looking in terms of this set. Now, a lot of time we see in computer forensics, we do not only get the desk, but a lot of time we get the mobile phones also. So if we are getting the mobile phones, then the behavior of mobile phones are slightly different from our desktop or a laptop in terms of that in a desktop and a laptop and a server, we can say remove the individual components. Say, for example, if I have, we can remove hard drive, we can remove RAM, we can remove processor, we can remove power supplies, we can disintegrate them into all these different components. But with cell phones, we just cannot do so because they are available. Every component is available on a single PCB. So the storage is also soldered on the board. RAM is also soldered on the board, processor is also soldered on the board, security DPM chips are also available on the board. So it would be very, very difficult, and it requires huge amount of expertise to remove these things separately and then do the analysis. Okay, so primarily in mobile forensics or smartphone forensics, we tend to work on the original device. So this is the only exception in disk forensics or in say mobile in computer forensics, where we cannot clone the data. Okay, just like this. Okay, so in majority of the cases, we tend to acquire this data at different levels. So if I have a cell phone, I can acquire this data at three distinct levels. One is primarily, if you look, logical level, another is file system level, another is the physical level. Say logical level is very simple. That means, say if my suspect device is having 100 contacts, so if my suspect can see 100 contacts, then I can also see 100 contacts. If I extract this data into a tabular form and print it, that is just the logical data. Now, next level is file system. File system means I will get some operating system files, some APK files, some other manifest files, etc., which is not available or which is not viewable to the suspect just by opening the mobile phone user interface. So there are certain files which you cannot see in the user interface of the mobile operating system. If I'm able to extract that files, that extraction is termed as file system extraction. Then next level is the physical. Physical means making bit by bit forensic image of the internal onboard soldered memory. Okay, so that is just like this, which we are like doing up over here. So just like we are creating a bit by bit forensic image of a thumb drive, similarly, if I obtain a bit by bit forensic image of a mobile phone, that would term as a physical extraction. Now, in practical, obtaining the physical image is the most costliest and most tedious one. Okay, and since the new release of the Apple iOS and Android operating system, it is becoming more and more difficult day by day to obtain the physical images. In case of Apple, it is impossible. So whatever extraction we can do with an Apple iPhone is purely based upon the file system. That is also iTunes backup. So you take any commercial tool or any open source tools. If they are doing the iPhone analysis in the backend, they would be doing simple, plain, vanilla iTunes backup. Okay, so if you have iTunes backup, you can quickly view them either in the autopsy. You can load them into autopsy as a file, as a loose files or the logical files, or you can use some third-party viewers. Some of them are available, just like one is here. Let me show you one. One is like this application. It is called iBackup Viewer. And I will be sharing with you a list of tools to perform different tasks in computer forensics. Okay, so that would basically help you guys to look and use them in your environment. Now, another important thing is say when we have some physical image, then how we are going to process that physical image. So I'll quickly load one of the physical image from a case. Let's close this case. Open this case and let's say data. Okay, so these are some of the bin files from some Android phones. Let's see what we can get through. So what I'm going to do is I'm selecting hash is one, file system identification is this is good, this is good, EXIF is good, keyword search is good, email parser is not required because generally the Android devices would not have the Outlook PST or Mbox type of storage. Okay, data carver is good enough. Okay, then let's go for Android Analyzer. And now let's try to see. Okay. So this particular data is slightly larger. It would take some amount of time. Okay, but still, if I go in, what I've got is okay. So it is the partition list. Not to worry about. Okay, so now you can see it has started extracting the context which we have got through, and then some file system files. Okay, might be deleted ones. Okay, then you have started getting the images, videos, audios, call logs, messages, installed programs. Okay, so all EXIF metadata. Okay, so user content suspected, etc. So primarily with this Autopsy platform, you can parse all type of file systems since it is extendable with sleuthkit libraries or TSK libraries. It also has started supporting the Apple APFS file system, but not completely. The best tool for APFS file system would be the black bag technologies, which fall in commercial domain, and then NKS guidance is another. NKS forensics is a popular tool which basically supports largest amount of file system currently on the industry. So these are the things. So now if you look primarily in this set of data, you can see the messages, SMS, you can see the data, Android messages, from where it is coming, etc. Installed programs. So now what you have is the packages. Okay, now these packages can be extracted out. Okay, and if required, then these packages could be say analyzed for potentious malware activity, whether these packages are malicious in nature or not. What you can do is, a lot of you, I don't know how many of you have used Cuckoo sandboxing engine. So what you can do is you can integrate Cuckoo with this. Okay, so there is a plugin, a Python plugin available for this, which will allow you to send any executable or any file from here to a Cuckoo sandbox and perform the sandboxing on the Cuckoo and then digest the results back. So that is another extension for performing these type of activities. And here it has tried to identify that okay, what these things it has identified that like WhatsApp numbers, devices, phones, etc. So these are the things which are up there. Okay, so now these are the things primarily which you can identify. You can identify these things like in terms of executables. None of them are available, but some PDF files, etc., etc. Okay, so these are the things which basically helps us in looking through this set of data. So at this point of time, if you have any question, then do let me know.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
If there are any questions, you can drop a message in the message box. They are all participants. If you have any question, you can drop a message in the message box.